Hey friends, spoilers for both The Man from Earth and The Man from Earth HOLOCENE. Let's go! The Man from Earth HOLOCENE, or TMF for short, is set pretty much 10 years after the first movie, and of course continues the story of John Oldman, who has now once again changed universities. As we saw at the end of the first movie, he does this about every 10 years or so, and has changed his name to John Young. Get it? This is not an overly complicated film, so I will just give a bit of background information on John and where he is in his life right now. John Oldman, now John Young, is about 14,000 years old. For some unknown and thus far unexplained reason, he has super good healing powers, which renders him more or less immortal. Kinda like Wolverine. He's a Buddhist in principle and teaches religion and history at universities. He once went around preaching goodwill and peace among humans but was killed for it. Except he didn't die. He healed quickly and bailed out of there pretty fast using some breathing techniques and whatever, disguised himself as dead. So yeah, that's right, he was Jesus. He accidentally started Christianity. Whoops. He then felt pretty bad about it and what it had turned into and how his words were so misconstrued, and thus he had to hide, or decided to. So he spends his life teaching under the radar and moving on every 10 years or so to avoid detection. This is until recently when he started to notice himself aging and not recovering from wounds as fast. He thinks it might have something to do with the food, as in all the processed shit, or that perhaps he has strayed too far from his original lifestyle. In the first movie, when John first posits the what if question, he asks, maybe he has done something right, something that everyone else in history missed somehow. So even back then they were talking about lifestyle and diet. This is one of the main focus points in this movie. Is John Oldman finally dying? Is his time finally up? We never really get a solid conclusion, but we will talk more on that in a bit. So these smelly kids, John's new students, start investigating John, and they manage to convince themselves that he is like totally immortal. They contact Dr. Jenkins, the guy from the first movie, who has since written a book publicly outing John as the immortal caveman from the past. Jenkins has since been laughed out of the academic community and now spends his time sorting through troll posts and hate mail. No one believed his story, except these meddling kids. So long story short, the kids convince themselves that John is the immortal caveman and eventually confront him. John has been avoiding detection for years, cause the whole worship thing, and decides to take off. John has a new girlfriend now, but he leaves her cause the kids are gunning for him. But also, it would be hard for an immortal person to have a relationship with a mortal. He says to Carolyn, his gal, that he told her that one day he would have to move on. It's a pretty shit thing to do, but what's John gonna do? He lives forever. Well, kinda. It's a tough moral choice here. Forever alone, tell the truth, or leave your loved one's heart broken. It's a poignant scene, and you really feel for both John and Carolyn. The kids confront John and for some reason taser him. They tie him up and the religious one fully freaks out and has an existential crisis. This scene was the weakest by far, I reckon. Couldn't John just talk them out of it and be like, dude, you've kidnapped a college professor. I'm not an immortal. I'm just a teacher. You're all gonna go to jail forever unless you let me go. Or something to that extent. He did try this for a little bit, but it very unconvincingly. Then, when he is alone with the religious kid, John's like, yo, Jesus ain't no thing. He's just a dude. Me! I'm Jesus! So the religious kid stabs him and runs away. Classic. So anyway, John escapes and heads to the hills where his old friend Harry from the first movie catches up with him 6 weeks later. But more on that in a bit. We get a small mid-credit scene where an FBI agent approaches Dr. Jenkins at his home, asking about John Young. Apparently, the FBI have been tracking the elusive John Young and have connected him to a string of violent murders. The FBI agent says his description matches a guy who died years ago, but witnesses keep placing him at the scene of violent crimes. Sick, twisted stuff. Nightmares. Always a different name, always a different place, same description. He asked Jenkins, could an immortal, identity-changing serial killer such a thing exist? Jenkins says, anything is possible. A throwback to what many characters said in the first movie. The religious kid is still missing, and so the FBI also think he could have possibly kidnapped him too. Many speculate or perhaps hope that the FBI agent is actually another immortal, but like the opposite of John, evil John. While John is all about peace and love, the other immortal is all about death and hate. Perhaps he's the one who is committing all the murders, not John, yin and yang. But this is all speculation. In the first movie, John Oldman briefly mentions the possibility of other immortals, telling of how in the 1600s he met a man that he thought was like him, shared stories and so on. They then parted ways and for whatever reason never kept in contact. John also says he thought he saw him 200 years later in a train station in Brussels, but he couldn't be sure. He never knew if this man was just playing with him or was legit. So could there be other Holocene men like John? I'm just going to take a moment to give my thoughts on the movie, a bit of a review if you will. This movie got bashed pretty hard, and to be fair, yes, it doesn't hold up to the first movie, but how could it? The first movie is a fucking masterpiece of storytelling. I just rewatched the first movie about an hour ago and it literally brought tears to my ears. It is truly a spectacular piece of cinema. This movie, HOLOCENE, however, feels like more of a B-side. However, I love the story of John Oldman and really want to see more of this. I did feel like this movie needed to steer clear of the shitty kids and have a far more intellectual dialogue and philosophical discussions. The first movie was great due to its intelligence, its discussion on history and humanity, and its twist at the end made it into an actual sci-fi, not just an intellectual drama. The Man from Earth HOLOCENE, however, was more about John's day-to-day life and him trying not to be discovered, which is fine, but it lacked that highbrow dialogue that the first movie had. I still enjoyed it because the character of John Oldman and his story is totally fascinating. I would absolutely watch another one, but it needs that highbrow intellectual sci-fi and scholarly dialogue that the first movie had. The Man from Earth HOLOCENE, though an interesting enough chapter, it was just missing something. I believe it was missing the intelligent dialogue and the sheer intellect that the first movie had. I don't even care if the characters were flawed from time to time or the acting and the budget was a bit off. It's the story that matters most to me, the conversation. This movie kind of missed that, but I enjoyed it enough and just love the John Oldman story, so yeah. Bring on a third, I say. What would I like to see in a third Man from Earth movie? Well, being an old school romantic, let's have John discover, through witty, highbrow, intellectual conversation, a mate. Another immortal like him, a woman he can fall in love with. An Eve to his Adam, if you will. Let John find the love he can share immortality with. And if it is his time, if he can't get his regenerative powers back, give him a love that he can grow old with. Another Holocene being fated to age in this new era. That would be the happy, tingly, wingly conclusion I would love to see. But hey, whatever. I'm not a filmmaker. I'll watch whatever they pump out. Okay, so let's continue the breakdown of HOLOCENE. So John explains that he has come up with a term for himself, the HOLOCENE man, as in a man of the HOLOCENE era. I've been using this term to describe John throughout this breakdown, and obviously it is in the title of the movie as well. Harry says that the HOLOCENE only goes back 12,000 years, however, and John is way older than that, at least 2,000 years old. And also, the scientific community is starting to coalesce around the idea that the HOLOCENE is coming to an end. We are now living in the Anthropocene. Ta-da! I'm a nerd! Is John's slow deterioration a reflection upon the end of an era? Harry states that the impact of man's activities on the planet being so severe it has changed permanently, creating a whole new epoch. To which John replies, that would explain a thing or two about my condition. Literally, the end of an era. John leaves with Harry to visit Harry's dying father. Harry said his father would really like to meet him. Why does he want to meet him? I don't think it's important, just that John is the most amazing phenomenon the world has ever produced. Living history, and as Harry is an intellectual, we assume his father is too, and so it's just an opportunity to meet the most amazing man in history once before he passes on. Or, as some fans speculate, his father is another immortal. Probably not though, but who knows? Give these guys some money so we can find out. I did. Will John get his powers back? Will he find other immortal people? Donate today and let's find out. I'm absolutely not getting credit for that. I think, give him some money. Would you like John to get his regenerative powers back, or should he pass into the ether? I don't know how I feel just now, but I sure love pondering about it. To quote the HOLOCENE man himself, everything ends, and apparently nobody lives forever. Thanks for watching, buddies. A while back I made a video about the pros and cons of being immortal, mostly pros. It's a lot of fun, you can check that out if you want. Also, if you like stories, maybe check out my new podcast, True Story Bro, where I talk about my stories from traveling the world to childhood conundrums and much, much more. It's also a lot of fun. So check the link in the description if you want. New episodes are out every other Tuesday, unless I'm away traveling or just forgot. Cheers, friends.